Okay. Very good evening to all brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. Welcome to tonight's talk by Ajahn Achalo. I am Brother Teo. I will introduce Ajahn to you all. Then we will pass over the mic to Ajahn to continue with the talk. Today's topic is the Three Jewels of Refuge, the most dependable treasure.
Okay, hello, yeah, great. So I'm very happy to be here, actually. And the first time I've had the opportunity to offer some reflection on Dhamma in Malaysia. And I've told a few people, actually I was here 19 years ago as a backpacker. And I caught an overnight coach from Penang to Johor Bahru. And then I was hitchhiking up to Mersing, and then from Johor Bahru, and then went to Tioman Island, spent a week there, and then I had a friend who was staying on a very high mountain. I can't remember what it was called, but it was on the east coast. I had to get off that train, that jungle train, and climb up that very steep mountain, and that was fun. And then I went to Kota Bharu, and then I went back to Penang and I did a 1-month retreat at the MBMC. At that time I was renewing my visa from Thailand, but I thought I should explore Malaysia a little bit and take the opportunity to do that retreat. I remember it was very difficult. I remember sitting, walking every day, day after day for a month. But I'm very glad that I did it. It might be one of the conditions which makes it possible to come back to Malaysia. Maybe that good karma that I made in Penang 19 years ago. I was very grateful for the opportunity. A few more people just come. Come in. One thing that I'd like to do tonight, I'm going to begin by asking a few questions of people, getting a bit of a sense of who is here with me, who are we sharing this space with, get to know you a little bit. First of all, I want to know who believes in karma, who believes that karma is a law of nature and definitely functioning in the universe. Okay. Another question I want to ask is, who believes in rebirth? Yeah. Another question is, who believes that this Prince Siddhartha really was born in this world a little over 2,500 years ago? Who believes that's true? Okay. Who believes that this Bodhisattva became enlightened? Who believes that? Okay. And then who believes that since the time of the Buddha, other people have practiced what he taught and also become enlightened? Who believes that? Okay, very good. So if I were to ask those questions, sometimes I teach in Australia, if I was to ask those questions in Melbourne, if there was a number of Western Caucasian Buddhists present, some of those people would say, I think I believe in karma, I think so. Probably, possibly. And then you ask them about rebirth. Okay, yeah, I think it's possible. It's possible. So this is we can ascertain by this that people here are what we probably call traditional Buddhists. And another question I want to ask: who believes that heaven realms really exist? Raise your hands, please. Yeah, most people. Heaven realms, devas. Really are such things or not? Lots of heads nodding. So here we have predominantly traditional Buddhists, and I would say faith types would be your character type. You've been born into this interesting situation in Malaysia, mostly of Chinese ancestry. For me that's good news, because I'm also a faith type actually. Although I have this white body, my character type is similar to yours. I also didn't doubt these things from the time that I heard them. Started to first hear some spiritual teachings at the age of 15, and I remember hearing about karma and rebirth, and I remember thinking, yeah, that's the way it works, that's what's happening. So good. Faith type, you have, the Buddha would say certain factors of right view are present. So this is good. This makes you, another word we use, trainable, which is good news. We all want to be trainable. So who considers the Buddha as their refuge? If you could raise your hands. Okay, so now I'm going to challenge you a little bit. Sometimes I like to ask questions, I like to challenge. My intention here, please understand, my intention is that I want you to investigate your beliefs and then hopefully understand your beliefs a little better. So my question is, how can the Buddha be your refuge? He already died 2,500 years ago. So how can the Buddha be your refuge? Somebody who's dead 2,500 years, what kind of refuge is that? This is my question to you. Okay, well that's the Dhamma, that's not the Buddha. So you're saying his teachings are your refuge. Okay, the Dhamma is your refuge. His teachings are your refuge. But how can the Buddha be your refuge? I'm speaking to one who has the Buddha as his refuge, by the way. So we're thinking about this. How is the Buddha our refuge? I love that nice pregnant pause and a sense of people thinking. That's really, it's really nice. Just making sure that people are awake and really here also. So, what I would suggest is the Buddha's enlightenment that we have faith in reflects the potential of conscious beings. And so that's the potential of all of us. So when the Buddha becoming enlightened, he's the first example that we're aware of in this part of the eon of someone who became enlightened. So it's that potential, the very potential for enlightenment that we have faith. The Buddha discovered it, and then very important, we have faith that we have that potential. We have the potential for enlightenment. So that's the refuge. Your potential. Now, where is your potential? That's my next question. Where is your potential for enlightenment right now? Where is it? Okay, is it in the Tushita Pure Land, your potential? Is it with the Buddha? Is it in India 2,500 years ago, your potential? That's right. And the Buddha once said in one of the suttas, within this fathom-long body is the place where one gets enlightened. So if someone was to ask me, where is my potential for enlightenment, I'd point there. So this is very important for faith types to contemplate, because we are very comfortable doing pujas, and we are very happy making offerings. And if we don't reflect very wisely, this can all be out there. And actually what the Buddha statue, you can see I arranged a bigger one, very nice one. I also like these things. But it's a symbol of a potential that we have. And then that potential has to be unveiled, because it's right there, right now, in the very center of your conscious experience is a potential enlightenment principle. So we understand from the teachings that something obstructs us from this experience of enlightenment. I'm going to ask more questions. What obstructs us from enlightenment? I'll give you a hint. 3 root kilesas. Any ideas? That's right, greed, hatred and delusion. That's right. So, if there wasn't any greed functioning in your mind at the moment, and if there wasn't any hatred, and if there wasn't any delusion, what would you be? That's right, you'd be enlightened. So in talking about the Buddha as refuge, I'm trying to mirror back to you that he is your refuge because he's a symbol of your potential to be enlightened. And he discovered that. He had a very strong intuition. Everything he could see in the conditioned world was subject to aging, was subject to death, was subject to being separated from what was dear, subject to having to be associated with what was painful. And he thought to himself, why don't I, this is the conditioned world. He said, I'm still subject to conditions. The things that I long for and are interested are also subject to these conditions, bound for aging, bound for death, bound for sickness, bound for separation. Why don't I look for the unconditioned, the unborn? So he's very wise. He's thinking, well, if the conditioned exists, there must be an unconditioned. And so with his tremendous spiritual qualities, incredible determination, incredible sincerity, he searched very sincerely, inwardly. So we remember that when he was a bodhisattva and he left the palace, he was walking through King Bimbisara's kingdom, Rajagir. And the king was so impressed when he saw him. He came for alms near the palace, and the king saw him, and the king had his messengers follow him, and when he found out where he was, he went to him. So he was in a cave, alone, high on a mountain. That's when he left the palace. He went to a cave high on a mountain alone, and the king came and said, look, you look like potential to be a king. So why don't you share this kingdom with me, he said. He was so impressed by the Buddha's presence and his looks, and he said so. And the Buddha said, no, I don't want to share your kingdom. He said, okay, well, why don't you take it? You can have my kingdom. And King Bimbisara was so impressed with the presence of this obviously very special being already. And he said, I am not seeking for sensual happiness. I see danger there. I am seeking for something beyond that and better than that. I'm seeking for something that isn't subject to death, and that isn't subject to separation, that isn't subject to decay. And so the King Bimbisara said, okay, well, when you discover that, please come back and teach me. He's a very wise king also, King Bimbisara. So the Buddha went up on a mountain, and he's living in a cave, and then he's searching, and then he discovered he needed to study with teachers. And he went and he studied with some very gifted teachers, and we see from this the incredible qualities that the Bodhisattva had already, because he studied the 7th and the 8th jhanas. He studied the base of nothingness and then the base of neither perception or non-perception, and he mastered them. So this is quite remarkable. And then he had enough sensitivity and enough clarity to realize that even that, now this is pretty amazing. If one has a 7th or the 8th jhana, I don't have it, but I've talked to people who are familiar with it and know about it, and it's an incredibly radiant mind state that suppresses kilesa. So if somebody has 7th and 8th jhana, they're not experiencing greed or hatred, and suppresses the 5 hindrances, so the mind is very peaceful and very radiant. But somehow the Buddha knew even this is still subject to degenerating. He knew that. He had the mindfulness and the wisdom to see that even this most profound samadhi, the most subtle concentration, that you can fill the universe with this radiant, concentrated mind, even this isn't leading onwards. So then, as you know, he practiced austerities, eating just one small handful of food every day until he was very, very emaciated. And he was exploring then the absolute extreme of physical pain, seeing, is this a way out of conditions? By practicing patience to its extreme, will this liberate me? And he realized that even he was very sincere. He was like a skeleton covered in skin, and his hair was falling out. And he He said that whatever yogi has experienced painful feelings and difficulties in striving, they may have equaled this, but there's no way anybody ever felt more pain than this. So he's very incredibly sincere in his search. And then he realized, nope, that doesn't do it either. That didn't get me liberated. So then he discovered he had the insight about the middle way. And the middle way, which is using, and we're going to be talking quite a bit about the middle way in the retreat that I'll be teaching in the following week. The middle way is using a certain amount of concentration along with contemplation to develop insight. And then, so he had some very big insights. On one day, on the 4th, I'm going to give a more detailed talk about the insights that the Buddha had under the Bodhi tree. But just for tonight, giving a little bit of background about this incredible insight that the Buddha had, where he realized the thing that there's several ways that they present the Buddha's enlightenment. But what he said he did was he was able to recollect his past lives, 50, 100, 1,000, 10,000, and then obviously seeing the anicca of this, born, aging, dying, born, aging, dying, born, aging and dying. And then he was also able to recollect the past lives of other beings. And he was seeing born, aging, dying, and depending on karma, being born in a different birth in a different realm, and seeing the impermanence of that. And then he was able to see the condition behind the birth, which was craving. So he was seeing that, oh look at that, it's the craving for the pleasures, the physical and mental pleasure that one can experience within the 5 khandhas, that causes. So this is in seeing this clearly, in seeing the craving and seeing that that was the cause of birth, this is seeing the truth. So underneath the craving was ignorance. And so in seeing this, the ignorance isn't there anymore. He's seeing the truth. So ignorance is not seeing. When the Buddha was looking at this, the Buddha was seeing it, he could see. And so when he saw the cause of craving, and then what he was able to do was he was able to look at that and see the danger and then the escape. So the danger is the dukkha that we're all familiar with. So the craving is for the pleasant things that we can experience in life, in the human realm, in the heaven realm, whatever pleasures we're attached to, and we all are. That's the thing that brings us back. And the Buddha could see that actually it wasn't worth it. Because if you look at it more objectively, you can see that actually the dukkha is much more. That the pleasure is limited, but that the suffering is much more than in the conditioned world. The suffering is much more than the pleasure. And so the phrases are becoming disenchanted with conditions, dispassion arises. Dispassion arising, the mind lets go of its clinging abandoned. One realizes nibbana. So that mind's potential, it's actually occurring through a letting go. So it's right there. We're talking about Buddha as your refuge. It's right there. It's obscured by greed, hatred and ignorance. And we're attached to this body and mind that we have because of the pleasure that we can experience. But what the Buddha says through paying attention, and I'm going to be talking a lot about mindfulness over the coming days, because mindfulness is this part of the mind that we can pay attention with. So mindfulness is there as well, but it's kind of weak and fuzzy in most of us, because it gets pulled out into sights and sounds and tastes and all these things. Thoughts about the future, thoughts about the past, thinking that one is a self, thinking that others are a self, thinking that the world is a solid thing. Then this weakens mindfulness. When we train in things like breath meditation, we're training to clarify mindfulness. We're like pulling the mind back from the 5 sense spaces, resting it. I'm going to be giving people a lot of opportunities to practice breath meditation, to kind of come back into the center of conscious experience, pulling back from the other sense spaces. And then also restraining the mind sense space from thinking about the past and thinking about the future and kind of conceiving of oneself as a self. Because what happens is this quality that we have to be aware gets clearer and clearer and sharper. And when you have this clear and sharp awareness, you can notice the truth. So what we're habitually doing is we're projecting a delusion onto the world. We're very committed to it, that this is the way it is. Ajahn Achalo really is Ajahn Achalo, and I really am me, whoever you are, and that the world is the world, and the past really was the past, and the future really was the future, and we're very committed to these concepts. And of course, if you develop some sharp mindfulness, you begin to notice that there's actually only the present moment, and that everything else is something we're adding on into awareness. We're picking things up and filling up that awareness with a self, and with grasping at a body, and we're thinking about the past and thinking about the future. It's very normal. I'm not judging anybody for doing it. I do it too. But what we're training ourselves to do is to have a closer look at this. When we come to this meditation tradition, practice tradition. So all of the other stuff we do, the good stuff, the really nice stuff that we do, the dana, the pujas, the helping people, the being kalyanamitta, the friends. This, by the way, in the world is more and more rare, so I'm not criticizing it. I'm saying this is wonderful, this is beautiful. You people have a lot of good karma to be born in this place where you have each other as friends, and you have monks passing through, and you have opportunities to do retreat. It's all really good, and I'm very happy for you. The other thing I want to say, though, is what Ajahn Chah was saying. I was reading a talk of his recently, that a lot of what we do, our dana, our keeping our precepts, being helpful, helping people, giving to charity, all of that nice stuff, coming together, just being friendly, being supportive, it's like the leaves and the bark of a tree. It's not yet the heartwood. So in Buddhist practice, we've got our dana, we've got our sila, and then we've got our bhavana, mental cultivation. So as Buddhists, this is one of our duties, and this is actually really what it's all about. And there's something I'm going to say more about this, is like my kind of sense I have for Chinese Buddhists in Malaysia, Chinese Malaysians. I'm just going to ask more questions, and then I'm going to try and make some points again, come back to making some points. How many people at home have Mahayana images? Kuan Yin, Amitabha, you raise your hands. Yeah, more than half. How many people as children and or even now do pujas to Kuan Yin or to Amitabha? Don't be shy. Yeah, a few people. Then the other question I want to ask is how many people have been to Thailand, visiting the masters in Thailand? Yeah, a lot of people. So I have a bit of a feeling, and I could be wrong, but I have a feeling that the Buddhists in Malaysia probably spent some time in India building some good karma way back then, maybe during the time of people like King Bimbisara. We have more than 1,000 years of very powerful Buddhist cultures in India. So many people have some connections with India, but then my other feeling is, then of course Buddhism dies out in India. It's moved on to China. And then so I suspect that a lot of the Buddhists in Malaysia have some karmic connections with China. I mean, you have the Tang dynasty, the kind of when Buddhism was really flourishing, really powerful over a large part of China. You have that long dynasty there. And so here you come and you're born in Malaysia. You're not far from a powerfully Theravadan Buddhist practice country, just over the border. And then also you have these inherited practices from your Chinese parents. And so you have this interesting karma. I think it's very good karma. And I think that, the fact that you're here in this room and you know of the forest meditation tradition of Thailand, you have some faith, you have some interest, you're coming to listen to somebody talk about these wisdom teachings of the practice tradition. That means I think you've been practicing dana for some time, and I think you've been practicing sila for some time, and I think that you've been listening to wisdom teachings also for some time, because you can't be here without conditions. And in Kuala Lumpur we have 3 million people, and in this room we have 50. So there's some supportive conditions for this. Then I'm going to ask you, what happened to Buddhism in India? At a certain point, what happened? It's not that difficult a question. It basically was wiped out. So it existed for a period of time, was very powerful. Then it probably degenerated to a degree, and that was probably a factor in why it could be wiped out. It's probably there were more and more not so good monks and nuns, and this probably affected people's faith. But then at a certain point, as you know, there were some invasions, and there was a systematic attack on the institutions, and basically it was wiped off the face of India. By that time it had gone to Sri Lanka and Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and it had gone to China. Then the next question is, what happened to Buddhism in China? I think some interesting phenomena we called the Cultural Revolution. It was a pretty amazing thing happening there. It's basically we're talking about conditions in the conditioned world, and they have a certain nature, don't they? They have a nature to be, to arise, to stay for some time, to degenerate and to cease. The reason I have many intentions for the various things I talk about, one of the intentions I have is I want to help you people to recognize your good fortune, and then I want to help you to focus. Because among human beings, 6 billion of us now, you people here are very fortunate. I believe so. And when you come into a fortunate situation, you're born into that situation, and you all kind of know each other. You're kind of like, doesn't seem that special. But we, as not yet enlightened beings and beings who are affected by ignorance and delusion, tend not to see things very clearly. This is our big problem. And so what I'm saying to you is, it's probably the case that there you were in India putting food in the monks' bowls, doing your chanting, coming and listening to teachings, and then dead, reborn. Where are you going to go? No Buddhism in India. Probably spending some time in China. Okay, a few more lives. Food for the monks, food for the nuns, pujas, dead again, no more Buddhism in China. Okay, here we are in Malaysia. I believe, I don't know exactly your biographies, but it's something like that. It might not have been China and it might not have been India, but basically I believe you've certainly done Buddhist practice before, and you've done it for some time, and you've done it sincerely. Because now you hear of this tradition of Luang Por Chah and Luang Por Man, and you're interested, and here you are listening. And this is great. This is really wonderful. The reason it's great and the reason it's wonderful is because the Thai forest tradition is basically a fairly stripped back but very trustworthy package of practices which work to get people enlightened. And those practices can be traced back to the Buddha. And so many of us believe that Luang Por Man was an arahant. I believe that. Many of us believe that Ajahn Achalo was an arahant. I believe that too. Some of us believe that some of the senior disciples of Ajahn Achalo, also very special, have some special quality of attainment. So what that means is that we've come in contact with a living enlightenment tradition which can be traced back to the bottom of the Bodhi tree. That's really good, isn't it? And then within this forest tradition we're talking about practices which help us to cultivate mindfulness, sharpen our mindfulness, and then help us to contemplate in ways which help us to see the characteristics, anicca, dukkha and anatta. We learn how to investigate the body, this body and mind phenomena, so that ignorance and delusion decreases, and so that mindfulness, concentration and wisdom increase. The result of this will be a growth in insight, and if you keep practicing, it will become from small insights to powerful insights. At a certain point that becomes an unshakable insight, which is destined for Nibbana. So that's where this practice goes. Our challenge then is recognizing our extreme good fortune and not forgetting it, not forgetting how fortunate we are, and then also remembering that just like what happened in India, we're talking about millions and millions of very sincere Buddhist practitioners and huge Buddhist infrastructure, Buddhist universities, kingdoms where the kings were patrons, enlightened beings in probably every other forest in the time of the Buddha. Amazing. 1,500 years later, nothing left. And then in China, great monks, great nuns up in those mountains, up in the caves, great practitioners, millions probably. And then you have the Cultural Revolution and very few left. And the infrastructure just smashed. So what we take for granted is we kind of assume that our life will continue on its merry way, kind of, sort of like it has done so far. This is what we assume. And this isn't something that should be assumed. It's not something that should be taken for granted. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of the monks and nuns in the temples in the rural parts of China probably had no idea what was coming when Mao's Red Guard were getting ready. They had no idea that such devastation and such destruction should occur so quickly and so totally. Similarly, in Cambodia, when the Khmer Rouge became very powerful, again you've got Buddhist infrastructures and institutions and practitioners just wiped out for decades. So this is something that we have to remember. We have to remember that samsara is a really scary place where really horrible things happen frequently. That's a fact. And we go around thinking that our good opportunity is going to last forever. This is our assumption, this is our habit. So, very good karma to be born in Malaysia at this time, I believe, and a very good opportunity, because all of those practices that you've been doing and your faith is an excellent foundation. It's a really good foundation. But then now you have this challenge where if you don't want to miss your opportunity, or at the very least make the best of your opportunity or make something of your opportunity, we have to learn to be focused and disciplined. Because Buddha's teaching can be likened to a discipline. He talks about his Dharma and discipline, actually. In the suttas he refers to his teachings as the Dharma and Vinaya, which is the teachings and the training, or the teachings and the discipline. So Buddha's practice is a lot about discipline. As people who visit the forest monasteries know, the 3 a.m. getting up, the 1 meal a day, the sitting on the hard floors. There's a lot of discipline there, and all the things that the monks have to give up. So in the lay life as well, if you want to meet with the heartwood of the Bodhi tree, you have to be disciplined in your practice. And if you want to make karma, I was talking about the 3 Jewels of Refuge being the most dependable treasures. So I'm not talking about in the short term. I'm talking with the samsaric perspective. I'm saying that in the past, I'm quite sure that it was the case that you were very sincere in your refuge. You went for refuge in the past and you were sincere. You really had faith in the Buddha and you really practiced. And then because of the accumulated merit, here you are again. Once again, strong faith, opportunity to practice. But if you want to meet with wisdom teachings again, and this is one of the things I'm going to talk about, because even now as we speak, I think it's fair enough to say that the Thai forest tradition is degenerating. So it's like you have these great masters coming and visiting, but we need to understand that they were the result of very specific conditions. First of all, their accumulated merits from the past, which were vast. But also when this last generation of monks were getting enlightened, when Lumpur Mun's day, most of Thailand was forest. And then by the time Ajahn Chah and his contemporaries were enlightened, the forest was being chopped down. But I think the population was 20 or 30 million. Now you have 65 million people in Thailand and you have very little forest left. And so it was certain conditions that was making it possible. A quiet place, which wasn't too busy, where people could pack their ball bag and go off on an ox cart track and wander, and not very long would be in a pristine forest, which was wonderful for reflection. And they would hear by word of mouth where the various enlightened masters were, and they would walk sometimes for months across the Isan or from Bangkok to find the enlightened master, and they would find him and they would be able to practice close to him in very quiet circumstances, with a lot of renunciation. It wasn't very materially developed, there wasn't much sensuality. These people had a lot of patience, a lot of humility. They were hard-working, they were tough. So again, it's one of the things we're not quite recognizing. We're not recognizing just how much Thailand changed in 50 years. So those great teachers are still teaching, and monks like me are still trying. But they're not the same conditions. And I think it's fair enough to say that really, truly enlightened masters are becoming thin on the ground in this world. So again, I'm trying to mirror here your particular good fortune. You've met something very special. And even as we meet it, it's like it's beginning to slip through our fingers. So what I'm saying is, please don't let it slip through your fingers. In terms of the most dependable treasures, more than 2,500 years since the Buddha passed away now, and Buddhism, still some enlightened masters, but as I'm saying, I think in general there's a trend that there's less and less. And the world in general is becoming a place where it's less and less supportive to practice. And we don't quite recognize this, and this is part of my job and my role here, is to hold a mirror to you and help you recognize it. How much life changes, and how much this affects our situation and even our minds. So I'll just ask you now, since the internet and the mobile phone arrived, how many less quiet, reflective moments do you have? Be honest with yourself. Just think back 15 years. Think back 15 years, and I want to ask you, was your life more spacious 15 years ago? If it was, you can nod your head, yeah? Did you have more moments where it was just you? So now you have a challenge. Even when you're alone, could be anyone, and in the past, if you were a little bit restless, but you were alone, you're a little bit restless, okay, you're just being with the restless. But now you're like, pull out the iPhone, what are we going to do? What can't you do? Check the football, check the best durian price. I don't know what you do, but you do a lot, don't you? When we get that restless, distracted energy, we can pull it out and we can have a look. What's happening on the stock exchange? So this trend I'm suggesting to you is most likely going to continue. As you know, there's a lot of money in information technology, and some of the very best brains on the planet are working very hard at working out how to make you more attached to these things, make it more convenient, more entertaining, more fascinating, more easy, more affordable, you might never have a moment to meditate again. This is very serious, actually. I know I'm joking, but it's very serious. So what I'm saying is the tendency in the world to be pulled out through the sense spaces, and now it's the mind itself which is pulled out into the world in this cyber thing. Very powerful phenomena, which isn't very peaceful, and there's probably not much contemplating on impermanence, unsatisfactory and not self-occurring when we're doing that. It's a kind of distraction, it's restlessness. And so what I want to say to you, for those of you who are going to be attending the retreat, I'm really happy because we're going to have an opportunity to pull back from the five senses. Hopefully you're going to turn off the phone. I really hope you do. I can't force you to. I'm thinking next time I come, if people are interested and they want me to come again, I'm going to make a condition. I can't do it yet because you don't trust me enough. But if you trust me after this week, I'm going to say, yes, you can come, but you have to give me your phone. I'm going to lock it in my room. And then you can experience something of what meditators used to experience just 15 years ago, before this started happening in our world. If we want to meet, this is important, if we want to meet the Buddha's teachings again, and if we want to meet people who are actually practicing, and if we want to meet people who've had good insights from their practice, the karmic cause for that is practice. So you can't just put oranges and glasses of water in front of practice. And like I say, I love puja myself, I do it, I love it. I've got no problem with oranges and glasses of water. But in terms of the Buddhist, the heart would, and really taking Dharma for refuge, we have to begin being disciplined, isolating this quality of mindfulness, recognizing what is a hindrance. I'm going to be talking about that later in the retreat as well, the 5 hindrances. We need to become familiar. What is a hindrance? Because the Buddha explains that the hindrances are like bandits that steal peacefulness from the mind. So we need to recognize when are the bandits around? Where are the robbers to the peacefulness? What do they look like? We need to become familiar with them. So we actually need to notice when the mind's affected by them, so that we can let them go. And then when we let go of the hindrances, you notice, this is a peaceful mind. This is the mind which is resting in its own innate awareness, feels like this. And we become familiar with that peaceful feeling. So I want to ask now, who has a daily chanting practice? Please raise your hands. A couple of people. And who has a daily meditation practice? About 1/3. You Malaysians, you Buddhist Malaysians, you can do better. You can do better, and I want you to do better, because that's what will serve you best. What I like to recommend to people who don't yet have a daily meditation practice is, please start one today, and then start with 10 minutes. Because no matter how busy you are, everybody has 10 minutes. And in that 10 minutes, seriously, the phone off, or at least in another room where you can't hear it. And then train in breath meditation. Forest tradition places a lot of emphasis on breath meditation. It's a really wonderful method, trustworthy. The Buddha said breath meditation is the crown jewel in the crown of all meditations. I want to talk a little bit about this skillful means. This is part of the refuge, actually. Training in mindfulness of the breath becomes part of the refuge. It's really amazing. This is a refuge of Dhamma. When you wake up in the morning, you have breath there. And all throughout the day you have your breath. And as you're falling asleep, you have your breath. Now when you train in being mindful of breathing, the mindfulness of the breathing is in the very center of your conscious experience. This is enormously helpful because in using the breath, as we were talking about, the mind's being pulled out through the eyes, through the ears, through the nose, through the tongue, rushing off into the past, rushing off into the future. You can use the breath, close the eyes and use the breath to come back into the center of the storm. When the mind's agitated, the breath will be heavy, but it's there. And when the mind's less agitated, it'll be more normal. When the mind's peaceful, the breath will be very subtle and refined. And in learning to pay attention to the feeling of your breath and the quality of the breath, you will learn a lot about where your mind is at. Another thing I'm going to talk about in my retreat in more detail is the Anapanasati Sutta, with the Buddhist teachings on breath meditation. There's my favorite paragraph in all of the suttas is in that sutta where the Buddha actually says, in training in breath meditation, the 4 foundations of mindfulness are brought to completion. And in bringing those 4 foundations of mindfulness, training in those 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 7 factors of enlightenment are brought to completion. This is a very important message from the Buddha and a very, very clear hint. The Buddha is saying, just by this mindfulness of breathing, if you're sincere, you will learn and understand about physical feelings, mental feelings, mind objects, dhammas. You'll develop a lot of insight and these beautiful qualities, mindfulness, investigation into Dhamma, then later on as you get some peacefulness, rapture, tranquility, concentration, all of this coming from breath meditation, if we train in it. And I'm going to talk in the retreat a little bit about what Ajahn Chah, how he explains to use Butto, breathing in Put, breathing out Do, how we use this to train the knowing, this mindful, this innate awareness, how to train that knowing to be present in the body. And you can use this with the breath as well. Breath meditation, very powerful, as we've been talking about, can be taken to the point of jhana, my teachers explain. So it can lead you, the breath getting more and more refined, but you're training in keeping your awareness in the body, whether you're experiencing the breath and then these longer moments between the breath, but you keep your awareness right there where the breath was, and then the breath can stop and then the mind can enter an absorption. So you can train breath awareness to this very, very refined, the epitome of refinement, and into very profound concentration. So the breath can do this. For on a more practical level, you can use your breath, can't you, to relax. And then if you're trying to be with the breath and you can't, it's really important. You use the in-breath to establish mindfulness and you use the out-breath to put down. If it's unskillful, if it's unwholesome, put it down. And we're training ourselves, and Ajahn Chah places a lot of emphasis upon letting go. But we all know that we need to let go of unwholesome things, various types of greed and anger and delusion. And a lot of our meditation is trying to. But we train in breath meditation, we train in, okay, put it down, breathing in, establishing mindfulness, really being here, breathing out, okay, whatever it is, put it down. Very helpful tool as we train in this letting go. Then what most people experience as they practice more and more breath meditation is that being able to do that becomes a refuge. This is part of your refuge in Dhamma and part of your refuge in Buddha. Is when things are getting a bit busy and a bit crazy, you can just close your eyes and feel that breath, if you've trained in it. And whatever it is that's starting to agitate you, you can put it down before you get agitated. And you have that sense and you begin to develop more and more trust. Isn't it amazing? In the very center of my own heart, in the center of my own conscious experience, is this cool, spacious, wise place that I can come into. This is a refuge in my heart. But this needs to be trained. And that's what the forest tradition is all about. Not everybody uses breath meditation, but because it's the foundation of my practice, I'll be talking a lot about it. And some people just use that word Butto like a mantra. Butto, 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 in the mind, using it in a similar way. Using it as a way to recognize hindrances, drop hindrances, notice when a mind state is wholesome or unwholesome, and learning how to put it down by picking something else up instead, you see. So the mind needs mind objects. The mind, it's like it needs food. And it will have an unwholesome one or a wholesome one or a neutral one. And so what we're doing when we become meditators and we develop more skills is we're learning how to put down the unwholesome and we're learning how to pick up the wholesome. Since our mind is always picking things up all the time anyway, we're developing a bit of sophistication about it, a bit of discernment, and we're beginning to train it so that it picks up things which should be picked up and doesn't pick up that which should not be picked up, or at least learns to put it down more quickly. And today I was coming back to the Chinese Buddhist karma that some of us have. And today I was in a car, and yesterday I was in a car, and there was the Heart Sutra mantra playing on the stereo in the car. It's very interesting, this, so many of you will know it. Teyata gate gate paragate parasangate bodhi soha. I was once, when I was living in the monastery, in our branch monastery in America, with Ajahn Achalo, the monks, some of the monks had the good fortune to go and listen to a teaching by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And he made a translation of what he thought that mantra meant. And it's sometimes translated as going further, going beyond into Bodhi. And the Dalai Lama said, no, actually what it is an instruction. Go further, go beyond into Bodhi. And it's basically the same message. So you can chant it as a mantra, and you can do it as a puja, and you can sing it with a very beautiful melody, but actually it's an instruction. It's an instruction about practicing. And what you have in the Thai forest tradition, we're talking about what is Buddho. I'll be talking about that at length during the retreat. It's in training this mindful awareness and training our wisdom and training our sampajanya, our clear comprehension, for us to be mindful, to be collected, to have discrimination, to be aware of what's affecting the mind, to know what's wholesome, to know what isn't wholesome. That's what Bodhi is. That's what Buddho is, if we train it. It's the thing which allows, it's like refining gold. You're taking out the dirt and the iron and the black stuff, and you're refining this gold, and that's Bodhi, that's Buddho. And so you have your instruction in the Mahayana also. Go further, go beyond into Bodhi. Soha, may it be so. So all of the pujas and the chanting, it all has a reason. It's to remind us to practice. And so I really hope that this lifetime, having come and been born in this situation, and now meeting with wisdom teachings from practice tradition, and you speak English, and many of the monks speak English, and the foreign monks who've trained in Thailand who've learned to translate their teachers, translating for you. So now we have a lot of opportunity to practice. And then I hope that you do that practice, because my hope for you is that at the end of this life, I'm going to ask one more question. I like to ask questions. Who thinks that they're going to become enlightened this lifetime? Okay, 2 people. They're determined to start to. I hope so. But everyone else wasn't sure yet. It's not easy to become enlightened. I'm not enlightened. I've been trying very hard for 16 years. But if we practice, actually if you want to meet with the practice tradition again, you have to pick it up. And you have to bring it into your heart, and you have to bring it into your life, and you have to do it. As the Buddha said, he walked the way himself. Having done that, he can point the way. All of those teachings is the Buddha pointing the way. Individual practitioners have to practice. They have to walk the path, the Eightfold Path. We have to do that ourselves. If we don't practice, many religions teach generosity, many religions teach to be charitable, many religions teach the Brahmaviharas, metta and compassion. Many religions have a focus on community. So it's just important to understand that as this Buddhist dispensation, gradually gets weaker and weaker, it has to degenerate and it has to disappear. That's the nature of conditions, and the Buddha's Sasana is a condition. It's functioning within samsara. It degenerates and it ceases at a certain point. And then in a very, very, very long time, another Buddha comes. But if you want to continue to meet with the Buddha's teachings, you have to practice those teachings. So I'm here for this week to encourage you to do that, and it's my honour and my pleasure, and I'm happy to meet you all, and I hope that something I've said has been helpful.